You don't have to do anything big for actual, recognition or persons to validate certain things that you're doing. Once you do your work and you see how well persons respond to you, how your patient respond to you, how your managers or the persons that you work for, how they deal with you on a daily basis, you know that you've earned their respect because of the work that you're doing. All right, hi everyone, thank you so much for tuning in. So today I'm actually going to talk to you a little bit about my experience so far working in the house call as a nurse practitioner. So I enjoy every aspect of it. Well, I've had a few encounters that actually stood out a lot for me was, some of these patients are in like group homes, and when they're in group homes you're thinking that they're getting the best care that they're supposed to be getting. But for me, I wasn't really impressed with some of the group homes that I've been seeing or seeing these patients at, because it is poorly managed. The patients are not getting the care that they're supposed to be getting. At least that's what I feel, because sometimes you'll see patients walking around and they're walking around looking like they're homeless. They're in clothing that actually doesn't fit them, holding up by one hand. Their face is looking like they haven't had a shower for days. But I remember there was a situation that we had a patient, or I had a patient that was just admitted to the facility, and when I saw this patient, the patient was more of the patient didn't seem like the patient was alive. She was alive and well, but not alive and well to the point where she was fit to be in a group home. She needed to be on hospice, to be exact. But at that time I wanted her to be seen in the emergency room because her lab values that were done a few weeks ago were all abnormal. Hemoglobin was abnormal, her liver functions were abnormal, everything that was just looking out of range for her or deranged for her. And so I was just not impressed with how she was looking, and being in a group home where she's just feeling nauseous and not eating or anything. And so my recommendation was for her to actually go to the emergency room, which I thought they would have done. So I decided, okay, then that's a part of my plan. That's the major part of my plan, was for them to be seen in the emergency room. It's not a case where, like, when I go to a patient's house where, so for example, they're the only person there, I will go ahead and call the ambulance service. No, this is a group home, so I'm not going to overstep whatever policies or procedures they have in place in terms of transporting their patients to the hospital. So I will just make the recommendations to whoever is in charge of these patients and have them decide on that. So that has been going on for like 4 months, where I've been like back and forth to this group home where I'm saying, hey, we need to get this patient to the emergency room because this is the situation. Hey, we need to do this for the patient because this is the situation. At one point I remember going to the group home and the blood pressure was a little bit low, because I know at the time the albumin level was low from the initial time when I saw the patient, and this was like, say, 3 months in. So just imagine the albumin level was low from initial 2 weeks when I met the patient, and no, this is like 3 months in. The blood pressure has been low for the patient, and I said, hey, can we get this patient to the emergency room, because the blood pressure is like, say, 70s over 30s, 70s over 40s. I did repeat, she was having like dizziness and everything. So the long and short of it, I wanted that patient to the emergency room immediately. However, they normally would transport the patient. I'm fine with that, but I'm not going to call the ambulance service on that. I can only make the recommendation, as I said. So it turned out that I left because I thought the intention was going to be that they were going to take my advice and take this patient to the emergency room. So when I went back the following visit, it turned out that I asked about, how was the visit to the emergency room? Did we have paperwork or anything? The group home owner looked at me and said, oh no, we only gave her some salted water and give her some salted chips, some potato chips, and that bring up her blood pressure. I'm like, we didn't even fix any other problem. We fixed one of the problem with the blood pressure just going up, and you were able to get a good reading. But at the end of the day, the albumin level was initially low, hemoglobin was initially low, her liver functions were abnormal, everything was just abnormal for this patient. This patient needs to go in and see a GI specialist. That's the recommendation initially. This patient needs to see a liver specialist. This patient needs to see a GI specialist. So all of that, it didn't really work out in her favor, the patient's favor. it was more of the group home owner just doing, oh, let's just fix the blood pressure, and thinking that everything else will be fine. Mark you, this patient wasn't really, say, eating that much. You know, she was having nausea. She was just feeling lethargic all the time. She was just having episodes where she's just sleeping a lot. But then they wanted me to go ahead and address all of that issue. I'm like, no, I cannot address all of that issue until the main problem is actually, you know, address. The patient needs to get a GI specialist. The patient needs to be seen in the emergency room, get admitted, so they can actually address that liver abnormal value. Then from there, the patient will probably feel a little bit better. So it turned out that, you know, this has been going on. It was almost like, say, 4 months in. And then it was at that time, because I was like, hey, we need to take this patient to the emergency room. Everything, like, I literally had to be blunt with this group home owner, because I'm like, we've been doing this back and forth for the last 4 months, and we're not getting anywhere. This patient is getting worse every single day. You're requesting all of these things, and none of these are going to help with this patient. So it turned out that she actually decided she was going to take the patient, but then, you know, it was the 4th of July. She had plans, so she's going to take the patient on 4th of July. She's going to take the patient after 4th of July because it was after holiday. She's going to see the patient the next day because she had other plans. And she finally took the patient to the emergency room, finally got admitted, and then the patient turned out to have, like, you know, pancreatic cancer. But the long and short of it is that, you know, sometimes we have our situations going on, but we take up these different, you know, duties. We take up the duties of nurse practitioners, we take up the duties of doctors, nurses, PAs, you know, group home owners, and we tend to forget about what our actual duties are supposed to be. Because that group home owner, I think, you know, her responsibility is to ensure that when we go in and see these patients and we do recommendations for these patients, they should be adhering to or ensuring that they are, you know, trying to meet the needs of the patient, and not necessarily just having these patients hanging around in their homes and not getting the care that they're supposed to be getting. They're getting a portion of the care because we're coming to see them, but in order for them to actually get the full extent of the management that they're supposed to be getting, the recommendations that we do, the referrals that we do, it is their responsibility to go ahead and try to advocate for that patient to get those testing or those referrals, or, you know, whatever it is that we recommend for them, that they get them done in a timely manner. And so I was just kind of saddened by that situation, because I'm just saying, it could have been 4 months ago that diagnosis could have been, you know, identified before, you know, we could actually see what's going on. Yes, the patient is of advanced age and there is other underlying problems, but at the same time, that doesn't mean that we're not going to be, you know, quick with trying to address certain things that are going on with the patient. And that is where we tend to fail. These persons are the emergency contact. These persons are the power of attorney for these patients. And so you can't really go overhead with, you know, saying, oh, we're going to call the ambulance and then transport them. No, you can't do that. So even though you really want to do that, you can't really do that, because they're the ones who have the last say for these patients. Unless you want to take it very far and say you're going to call and report them to Adult Protective Services or something like that. And you don't really want to get that far or that technical in a situation like that, you know. But it was just a sad situation for me, and that's one of them that actually touches me a little bit, because I was with this patient, and like every month I go in, I'm like, we need to get this patient to the emergency room, because I could see this patient just deteriorating every single visit that I was, like, you know, seeing this patient. And so that is one thing I love about being a nurse practitioner. I am able to advocate. I'm able to, you know, literally push for certain things to be done. I'm able to say to the persons or the group home owners or to the patients themselves or the family members, like, hey, this is a situation. You know, sometimes it can come across as being stern, it can come across as being, you know, demanding, but in order for you to actually get care done, especially for your elderly population, be stern with your orders. You know, you can't just have it and just leave it as a situation like nobody cares about them, because these patients will eventually, a lot of times they tend to get neglected by the the younger folks or other persons, and you don't want it to be a situations where your elderly folks are just being neglected because of, you know, other persons having other things to do and not focusing on them, the elderly, who are more vulnerable to neglect and all. So I love what I do and I enjoy it. I really like when I see, you know, persons taking up the advice of the providers and adhering to whatever recommendations that we give, because you can actually see a big turn in terms of those patients in their conditions and all. And that is just something that is very pleasing to the eye when I go in and see these patients on the second time. Because when I went and did a follow-up with the patient after she was discharged from the hospital, I know they were planning on doing like a Whipple's procedure and everything, but that, based on what is going on with the patient, you know, that was something that they had to literally mark off the list. But in terms of how she's looking, you could actually see that she is more a little bit, you know, awake and more alert, and she has a little bit more strength. She's eating, she's doing well since the diagnosis and since they put in the drain and everything. So it is a situation where I feel good now, knowing that, you know, she has been taken to the emergency room and she was admitted and everything has been, you know, identified. Yes, the outcome is not the best or what we wanted, but at the end of the day, we know exactly what's going on. It doesn't make sense we have patients who are just living in misery because of something that we fail to address. It doesn't make sense, you know. It's just a sad situation. But I'm happy that the group home owner was able to finally, you know, yield to the advice of the team itself and take up the responsibility and get that patient the help that they needed. But anyways, I just love what I'm doing. I am enjoying every aspect of it, and I do hope that, you know, if you take on this journey as a nurse practitioner, I just hope that, you know, you come in with your, you know, whatever you were taught in nursing school or graduate school, you know, just come out and give it your best shot. You know, advocate for your patients as best as they possible can. Be that change agent. You know, it doesn't mean that because everybody go over there and document that, oh, this patient is doing this or this patient is doing that, it doesn't mean that you're going to be doing the same thing. You know, be the one that actually make a change in terms of something good for your patient. Advocate for your patient. If you have a passion and a love for nursing, you know, you will eventually find that, you know, you don't have to do anything big for actual, you know, recognition or persons to validate certain things that you're doing. Once you do your work and you see how well persons respond to you, how your patient respond to you, how your managers or the persons that you work for, how they deal with you on a daily basis, you know that you've earned their respect because of the work that you're doing. And that's one thing I want us to actually always have in the back of our mind when we're doing our duty as a nurse or in any profession that we're doing. All right, so until then, thank you so much for tuning in, and I do hope that you will have a wonderful day. Bye.